Michael Patrick Shields is on the air.
Good morning, world.
Sorry to disappoint. This is Tim Doctor, filling in for Michael Patrick Shields in the morning, and this is a special edition of his program. This is the State of the State at First Light. Let's get to the news with Gary Austin. Gary, what's on the platter?
Well, Tim, I got to tell you, what'd you make of Governor Rick Snyder last night? Well, I tell you, he had a lot on the table, and he conveyed, I think, very directly. Would you agree, Tim, that job one, I think that's what people wanted to hear, and he made it very clear that's going to be priority number one for his new administration.
Right out of the gate, yeah. That was what everyone wants to hear. That's the talk. He has the jobs thing nailed down. I like his approach on it, and we'll see if it comes true. They own it now.
Yeah, they sure do. No question. Talk about jobs. We've got some new stats out, Tim, and we've got, statewide, 11.3% or 11.7%. That's what we're being told right now. Now, that's a drop a bit, so we're heading in the right direction. However, we've got to break this down in real numbers. The jobless rate really is closer to 16% because, as you know, the state no longer counts those who've given up looking altogether. So automatically, we add 5%, wherever we're told. When it comes to jobless rate statewide, add 5% to it, and that's the real number. So that's a top priority, too, for the governor. Now, how he's going to go about doing this, it's tough. He contends, though, tinkering with that business tax, some say, do that. That'll help. But Snyder says, not good enough. Get rid of it entirely. What do you think, Tim? I think that will certainly, from a Republican point of view, head the state in the kind of direction. It'll take a lot of pressure off businesses. They won't have to pay as much, get things restructured. In turn, the argument goes, and this is what Rick Snyder says, they have less of an obligation by way of taxes, more money on hand to hire employees and bring the jobless rate down.
Without a doubt, the MBT was a train wreck, and it's good to see that some adults are talking about getting rid of it. The elephant in the room, obviously, though, Gary, was how to replace that $1.5 billion shortfall, and we'll get there. But I've got to get over to and Gary, thanks so much for joining the program.
You bet.
I've got to get to Kyle Malin. Kyle stepped in early. He was an eager beaver this morning. We've got Kyle Malin, editor of MIRS News, in studio. You saw a lot last night. You heard a lot. Ambition. You heard a lot of ambition. What's your first reaction to the speech, the first State of the State speech?
Well, we know that we don't have Jennifer Granholm anymore, that's for sure. I mean, this was a CEO giving almost like a business board presentation. You know, he didn't have an actual speech. There was no teleprompter. I mean, he was going off rough notes. Before the speech, when the media usually gets its media briefing, and we also get a copy of the speech, 13, 12 pages, something like that, it gives us a chance to take a look at exactly where they're going. He didn't have any of that. He had 6 pages of notes, and he had some lines written out, but by and large, that was him ad-libbing. It was like we were all the people on the board, and he was giving the presentation, which was a lot different than Jennifer Granholm. The other thing I took away from the speech was that, all things considering, he wasn't all that bad. When we looked at the speech originally, I was looking for the wow factor. I was looking, all right, where's that big proposal that Granholm came up with, whether it was like the 21st Century Jobs Fund or everyone's going to have health care. And there wasn't any of that. And I thought, well, God, maybe this is going to be a bit of a dud. The only thing I could see in there was repealing the item pricing law. And then I saw Drick there at the end. Oh, okay, well, that's nice. But after he gave the whole package, it seemed very convincing. And as I talked to the lawmakers as they were coming off the floor, it didn't matter if they were Republicans or Democrats. They all found something different they liked about it, which I thought was very interesting. It wasn't bagging it right out of hand. It was finding something in particular, whether it was the urban agenda, whether it was the business tax, whether it was, repealing the item pricing law or Drick. They found something they liked about it.
It'll be interesting to get the Democratic reaction on this. It'll be very, I listened a little bit to Gretchen last night. The usual party line sort of talk, but I want to see if we can connect, genuinely with them as they come in one by one and say, come on, what did you really think? Because the guy was very genuine. Governor Snyder, he came across as, it did come across as a CEO speech, but he was very genuine. When he was generous, waving up into the crowd, I think people connect to that.
Yeah, I think they did. the Democratic Party chair, Mark Brewer, was telling the media afterwards, 80% of that speech could have been given by a Democrat. I mean, how many Republicans talk about health care and talk about it in a way that we need to improve people's health, and we got to have measuring points out there for people to judge, their obesity level. You look at this dashboard thing that he had on there, and when you're talking about metrics and comparing us to other states, that's something that's done at the business level all the time, and we don't really think about it. But here it is flash in our face. Here we are, our obesity levels are rising. How are we doing on public health? How are we doing education-wise? Are we improving in math? Are we improving compared to the rest of the country? It's something that the Democrats actually looked at and said, hey, we could maybe even work with this guy. When he's talking about developing an urban initiative, the Democrats were like, wow, seriously? I mean, we could have never expected Mike Cox to have something like that, or Pete Hoekstra. And now we're having a guy who's actually talking about bringing the MEDC into our urban cores, into Flint and Detroit, and trying to bring something in there. That's great. If you're okay doing something like that, all of a sudden maybe the business tax doesn't sound like such a bad idea. Maybe we can work with this guy. If he's willing to go there, maybe we can meet him over here.
He caught me completely off guard. I wasn't ready to hear him talk about using the MEDC. He's not an ideologue. He's looking at what he thinks are the best proposals, the best ideas from everything around him. Yeah, and he talked about the health care, caught me off guard, talking about wellness programs across the state, preventative this and that. We'll see. It was ambitious. What's missing from that speech?
Well, obviously he didn't talk about the budget, but I didn't think he was going to talk about the budget. In mid-February he's going to give a budget proposal, and at that point he can lay out how we get to the 1.5 and then also replace revenue from the Michigan business tax if he goes ahead and we repeal that and we need a new business tax. Talk about ambition here. When we eliminated the single business tax back in 2006, 2007, we had a half a year to go ahead and try and find a replacement, and that was ambitious. But think about this. If he really wants to have a balanced budget passed by the legislature by May 30, or even have an agreement with the legislature, forget about actually passing the bills, we got to have a business tax done by May 30. I mean, that is an aggressive time frame with a legislature where 60 of the 110 members are brand spanking new right off the street, and a Senate where 30 of the 38 members are new to the chamber. Now, that's very ambitious, and maybe it's conducive to this 6% flat tax in that, you've got people fresh, and this is what they're focused on. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the testimony, we're going to ram it through, and this is the only time we can do it. There is a time element. There is a bit of a rush. It doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be a rushed product, but we got to be going in a hurry. It is almost like a corporate time frame. I mean, they don't talk of things, we'll get this done in 3 years or something like that. We got to get this done now. And it's that sense of urgency that's going to be challenging for the legislature, I think.
Does anyone have any idea what he wants out of the Office of Urban Initiatives? Anyone?
No.
No. Okay. Honesty. That's great. I love it.
No, not
right.
really.
No. It sounds nice. Is that what he got out of it? A quick soundbite,
sure.
and Democrats loved it, or because I don't know.
Well, look. I mean, how many details? And I'm not going to try and defend everything in the speech, obviously, but how many details can you get into in a 40-minute speech before it starts weighing the thing down? I mean, you don't want a speech where you're diving into too many details, or else you're reading a dictionary up there. Everybody tunes out, they zone out, and they turn off the TV. That's not really what you want. At a certain point, we'll talk about what the urban initiative is, and at that point, maybe we'll dive into details, and it'll be a bit more exciting. On its surface, yeah, it looks kind of,
Interesting.
What is this?
It's very interesting looking. We'll see what it brings up. We're talking with Kyle Malin, the editor of MIRS News, in studio right now. What was one thing was there anything that you thought needed to be in there as part of what's going on in Michigan with our economic crisis? Something that was missing at all? It's an oddball question, just looking for a gut reaction. Something that's sticking out that's not there.
No, except for maybe like a big government program, but he's not like a big government guy. When Granholm was looking at the economy, she said, well, let's do the 21st Century Jobs Fund. And Rick Snyder said, well, instead of just narrowing it down to individual industries like high tech or whatever, let's open it up to everybody. And that was, I think, the biggest reaction that I heard on the floor when I was listening to the speech was when Rick Snyder said, let's stop picking winners and losers. It was a genuine eruption coming out of the Republican. It was the loudest cheer that I think I heard because it's something that they've been saying all along. One other point that I think I want to make, too, about economic development was how all the different business groups came together and seemed to get a little something special out of the piece of the pie. He brought in the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. He talked about bringing them in to look at needless regulations. He brought in SBAM, the small business people, said this economic gardening concept that you have is brilliant. We got to expand on that a little bit. The Detroit River International Bridge Crossing, a big thing with the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce. So you bring in all these different agendas from the business groups, and suddenly everybody's got kind of a hand in the pie here. Everybody's got some skin in the game, brings everyone together. They like that.
Okay, we'll talk some more in just a few minutes. This is Tim Doctor in from Michael Patrick Shields in the morning. This is a special edition of his program. This is the State of the State. At first light, we'll have Governor Rick Snyder. At about 7:06, Jase Bolger, Speaker of the House, at 7:10. Good morning, Michigan. This is Tim Doctor, filling in for Michael Patrick Shields in the morning. And this is the State of the State at first light. Coming up at 6:40, we'll have Paul Opsimer, State Representative from DeWitt, and also Barb Byron in the studio. Barb Byram, State Representative from Democrat from Ingham County. And I promise that I'll stop slammering over top of the names here. I got to get a cup of coffee here. But in the studio right now, Kyle Malin, editor of MIRS News. Kyle, dashboard metrics. What is he trying to accomplish with the dashboard metrics?
You know, for those people who are involved in, let's say, Weight Watchers or any of these weight loss programs, one of the things they get you on is by weighing in. So you're always like confronted by how much you weigh. You know what I mean? You just can't escape the numbers. And this is kind of the same kind of thing. And this gives us a chance to take a look at the numbers and see how we are. We can take a look at the charts on where are we in unemployment. Okay? We can see that the numbers are going down. Now, obviously, there's a reason it's not necessarily good why the numbers are going down, but the fact is that it's going down. There's all these different dashboards, like the functions on like a Mac. You know, you got this like dashboard function. There's all these charts on there, and I think the thing that the Department of Technology and Management and Budget came up with is very actually user-friendly. I hate using that word, but I'm going to go ahead and use the jargon anyway because I can't think of anything better. But it gives the state a way to look at how we are doing in important metrics, in stats where we should be improving, where we should be in the top 10, or we should at the very least be improving instead of declining. And so that folks who care about the state can go to michigan.gov/MI dashboard and see how we're doing on these very different agenda items. Just last night, I didn't look at them all, but a couple that struck me, you know, even for like parks. How are we doing as far as going to Michigan State parks? It seems like kind of a trivial thing, but if we're supporting our parks and actually going and enjoying our natural resources and giving money to these things, these kind of things should be up. If tourism is actually working, if $25 million for Pure Michigan should be working, these numbers should be going up. So it gives us something to look at. You know, maybe we're improving. I don't know how often he can update these numbers, but it's something that we can look at anyway, and something that he says he'll be going back toward after every during every State of the State.
So it's sort of like a crisis intervention there, where everybody gathers around and, okay, here's what we have to meet. Sort of like we're on the government version of The Biggest Loser. We've got to lose some weight. We've got to cut in the budget. And here's how we're going to do it. And you're part of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great.
Exactly.
We're talking with Kyle Malin, the editor of MIRS News here on the Michael Patrick Shields program. This is Tim Doctor filling in. What about comparing him? Let's try this. If you want to compare his speech or elements of it to Governor Granholm's speeches in the past, how would you do that? Any comparisons at all?
I think the one comparison that I would make is that he took some time at the end of the speech to single out individual companies within the state that are doing something successful. And he did that today or yesterday with a particular company out of Ingham County and elsewhere across the state, and highlighting the good things that happen. One thing that I would mention, though, is as far as a difference, is that he didn't ever talk about the past or inheriting a problem or dive too much into what kind of crisis we're in.
Great point.
You know, we didn't talk about that. It's as if that was just kind of a beginning, and it was really not happy talk for the sake of happy talk, but it's about getting to work and doing something different. And that's what I thought was extremely different. I don't have a crisis that was inherited to me. Poor woe is me. Let's get solutions. And that was the point in the speech very early, that I thought he said with the most passion and genuineness, let's start solving problems.
Because none of us want to hear it.
Oh, we're all tired of it.
We don't want to hear the same sob stories we hear at national, we hear at state. Yeah. They did this, and it's almost like they're setting themselves up to fail before they even get to it. Here's their back door. I don't want back doors. You want it, now take it over and fix it.
Right, exactly. And I think that he gave the plan on how he wants to get there, like it or not. I think that was refreshing to the folks who were listening to it, and maybe why we didn't hear a lot of negative talk afterwards. You know, you get the regular, oh, we got to see the details, whatever, yawn. But, I mean, by and large, everybody had a kind of an agenda item that they could grapple onto.
Josh, one of the program's assistant producers, is coming up on mic. What do you see, Josh?
Well, we got what we elected. I mean, we didn't want a politician. We voted out. We went outside the normal the scope for finding a leader.
We sure did.
And we said, we're sick and tired of these guys.
Right, the same old was not going to cut it. And you know what? It occurred to me watching him last night. His judgment call on deciding to run for governor was an ace, was a stroke of genius, because he looked at it with the CEO mindset and said, I can win that. He assessed the probabilities, the metrics, if you will, the dashboard for electoral success, and he was right. He was dead on the money with his assessment. Any other time period, any other election, people would look at him and go, what, one sharp nerd?
Yeah, right.
That's going to win the election? He nailed that decision. We'll see if he nails the rest of these. Mm-hmm. What about some of the ruffled feathers? I've heard rumors that, how do we say this? That some of the seating in the past on the floor there for the speech is less than optimal for some of the members.
Yeah, we did have a little bit of drama early on, and it all got straightened out at the end. But the Senate always comes into the House chambers to listen to the speech. And the chambers of the House of Representatives in Michigan is not like the well of the House of Representatives in Congress. I mean, this is very small quarters. I mean, it's hardly room for the 110 members of the House to actually feel comfortable sitting in that chamber, let alone having 38 guests from the Senate, and then the cabinet and the family and the judges and everything else. And so in the past, the 38 senators have got kind of crammed in the side corner near the front of the chambers. And, that's fine, I suppose. I mean, you're in the room. But a lot of the senators couldn't even see the governor speak. There's obstructed viewing there. There's the big pillars. And there was no real direct line of sight. Some of them were kind of staring at the back of his head, kind of like Brian Calley was yesterday. He was kind of like the kid in the corner over there almost, because the seat was so low, and this, his seat was so low, but the chair is so enormous, and it's kind of got lost in it anyway. The senators didn't like their seating, and so they wanted a seat in the front. Well, the problem is there's 38 of them, and there isn't a lot of space in the front. And if you start doubling up the seating in the front and putting chairs up there, and not only are you like hugging your arms the entire time, you're craning your neck, and you create a very small passageway for the governor to walk through. In the end, they were able to accommodate the senator's request after a little bit of back and forth with the facilities people, and create some mini rows in the front so as not to put the cabinet somewhere. I mean, you needed the first family right in front. I mean, you're not going to bump them. You're not going to put the wife in the corner. That would be very bad news.
Not good. No, you don't do that.
You don't do that. They get the best seat. But the senators did end up having a seat in the front. Everything was worked out in the end. I don't know who they crammed in the corner at the end. I did see some people sitting over there. Somebody was staring at the back of his head in a pylon. It wasn't the senators.
It took me about 5 minutes to realize that there was somebody, in fact, sitting in the big, huge chair behind him. It struck me as totally odd, because I'm sitting there, all of a sudden, there's an elbow right there. Who's sitting behind the governor? And you would have think that after all these years, somebody would have looked at that predicament with the governor standing up making a speech, the two chairs to the left and the right, and lieutenant governor sitting right behind him. I mean, let's look at it from his view. He's staring right at the back of the governor, just sitting there. It's old school.
Now, I didn't watch on TV. I was on the House floor. But how did the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader look at times. I watched it on TV in the past, and Mike Bishop and Andy Dillon, sometimes you could see the facial expressions, or Ken Sikma, when Granholm was giving the speech, you could see kind of the contortions on their face when there was something they didn't like, and it was almost laughable. I hope there wasn't any of that.
I didn't pick up on any of that. Josh, did you see anything?
Jase Bolger would lean into the shot at times, and he had a couple exchanges with the lieutenant governor during the clapping sessions, but they behaved themselves. They didn't talk when they weren't supposed to.
They were
and
good.
I didn't catch anything out of the ordinary. In fact, the quirks that I saw were from the governor himself when at one point it looked like he was distracted by something flying in the air. Maybe
It was the Mr. Miyagi scene when he looked like he had the chopsticks going for the fly, and you realize he's waving up, into the balcony or something. We're like, what was that? I love that.
He was having fun.
He doesn't care. He's going to be himself, and by golly, I think we need a dose of that. Just hi.
It was kind of interesting, too, some of the folks in the room. I saw Mike Cox, former Attorney General, who was obviously running for governor, was in the room. I asked him as he came off the floor, how many times did you picture yourself up there? And he said, without missing a beat, not once. So he's obviously over the election, and he commended the governor on his speech and said it was really good. He was a guest of Randy Richardville, the Senate Majority Leader. So he had only good things to say. And also Jocelyn Benson was there, the former Secretary of State candidate from the Democratic Party, who that same day, earlier in the day, said she wasn't running for Michigan Democratic Party chair. So interesting people in the room.
Is that going to hold up, that she is, in fact, will not run?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I
Okay.
mean, because they only have a month before this election at the convention, and so you need to have at least, anybody jumping in right now it would be a severe disadvantage. Only 3 weeks to compile all these delegates to vote for you against Mark Brewer, an incumbent who's got the union's backings. By and large, done a fine job. It's a severe uphill battle for anybody.
Kyle, is there anyone on the Democratic radar who could pull that off if they threw their hat in at the last minute against Mark Brewer?
Big name, star power.
Bob King from the UAW. Seriously, you would need like some super union head to say, you know what, the union coalition has now abandoned hope in Mark Brewer. We're going to go with somebody else. It's not necessarily the name. It's having the support of all those unions. You would need something like that. And right now, Mark Brewer, who is more or less a product of labor, is their person right now. Until you hear something different, it's him.
Coming up at 6:40 on the Michael Patrick Shields in the Morning program, we've got Paul Opsimer, State Rep Republican from DeWitt, Bar Byram, State Representative Democrat from Ingham County. At 6:50 in the same room together, we've got Senate Democratic Leader Gretchen Whitmer and Mark Brewer, as we were just talking about a second ago, Michigan Democratic Party Chair. The governor himself we'll have on the program at about 7:06.
Coffee shop's open, too.
Bonus. We'll get right to that. We want to throw it out to you in the audience. From what you saw in the speech last night and what you heard, do you think Governor Snyder will put Michigan on the right track? You can give us a call toll-free, 888-900-9966. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. This is Tim Doctor, filling in for Michael Patrick Shields. This is the State of the State at First Light. We'd like to welcome our friends at Fox 47 and all of the stations on the Michigan Talk Network. Great to have you with us this morning. It was a big night last night. If you're a political junkie, if you care about having a job, if you care about where your state is going to, the odds are you tuned in last night. And if you didn't, we will bring you up to speed on what Governor Snyder's first State of the State address entailed. We are loaded with guests this morning. Governor Snyder himself will be on the program at about 7:06. Speaker of the House, Jase Bolger, will follow him at 7:10. Coming in just beforehand at 6:50, Mark Brewer, Michigan Democratic Party Chair, and Gretchen Whitmer, Senate Democratic Leader. But first in the studio right now, we've got Paul Opsimer, State Rep from DeWitt. Paul, great to have you on the program, sir.
How are we doing this morning?
Good. You're up bright and early. Is this a normal time for you to get up?
Normal. Yeah, always be glad to stop by and say hello to Michael Patrick early in the morning.
Good to have you. So you're watching the speech last night and you're listening. What's the first thing that sticks in your head?
It was positive. It was upbeat, and it was very genuine. What you saw is the governor. I think by nature he's very positive. You've heard Tim Skubic talk about governors seem to have that extra positive gene. And I think the governor has that. He's been positive through his entire campaign. He had some great ideas. Public Act 72 has been discussed for the last 2 terms. We do need to make some changes in that area to allow the state to help local units of government long before they're in deep, deep trouble.
Take us through the Public Act 72. How does that work, and why did he bring it up? He's worried about the time frame, correct?
He's worried about the time frame because right now the state doesn't get involved until a city or a township is already basically insolvent. And we want to get involved a lot earlier to avoid them getting in trouble, such as Highland Park, City of Detroit, and like this Detroit school system
Right.
really needs to get involved much earlier.
Okay. What wasn't in the speech? Anything that you noticed that you wanted to hear?
There wasn't something in the speech. No, and there wasn't something in the speech, and I'm glad it wasn't. There wasn't a new large government program that we were going to solve the world hunger by simply investing another $1 billion of government money. And I'm glad it wasn't there. It was good. It was refreshing. He really took a good business approach.
Metrics. You don't hear that every day. We were talking earlier. When a governor comes in and says, this is the path to success, we're going to measure and we're going to measure and we're going to measure again. What is your reaction to that?
I agree with the governor. We've met 3 or 4 times on a one-to-one basis. I come from 30 years in business. That's the only way I know how to make a living is you measure what you do. If it's not working, you know it's not working. You then have the information to make the correct changes.
Okay. 1.5 to 1.8 billion, depending on who you talk to, shortfall in the budget. There's going to be some big cuts coming across the board. There is no choice. And he has stated implicitly there will be no, put it this way, no tax increases. That's off the table.
From the governor's office and his administration is it'll be an all-cuts budget, which I support and I agree with. And I think that's the direction we need to go in.
Can he really do it? I mean, it sounds great for the average person that's listening. Yes, we're going to cut our way and fit inside of our pants, basically. Can he really do it?
We can do that.
Can we cut this down?
Absolutely. The problem is, and you've heard this before, no matter what side of the state you're from, everybody thinks we're going to cut somebody else, and they won't cut me. And I think he's made it very clear, and I've tried to talk to the constituents in the 93rd District, everybody needs to take some cuts. And I think legislators, and you'll have Rep. Bolger on, our speaker, this morning, we've taken a 10% pay cut, and we've taken a 5% cut in our budgets, and that's the second one we've taken just in the last 2 years. And everyone needs to share in the pain.
Is there something that I mean, of course, there's a lot of love right now. Republicans have taken over. And as I say, you own it now. There's
Yes.
no excuses. I loved, as our previous guy in studio, Kyle Malin, pointed out, he didn't point the finger backward and say, hey, look what I've been given. Look at all the problems I'm inheriting. So, hey, in case I fail, you'll know why. He didn't do any of that. But you own it.
And that's something I think everyone's tired of. When I was in the minority, I didn't point the finger at the governor. I didn't point the finger at Speaker Dillon and say it's all their fault. Tried to work with everybody, and they don't want to hear excuses. They don't want us to point the finger. They just want the job done.
We have 1 minute quick before the break. Josh, what do you think?
Representative Opsimer, you're the former mayor of DeWitt.
Yes,
You've
sir.
worked and managed and led a local government, and the governor was talking about structural reform at the local government level. Do you think that's going to be, from what you know, a state-level, top-down approach where they say you are going to make these changes, or will they give the local government the framework or the leeway to make their own decisions?
We need to do 2 things, and I heard him say he wants to provide an incentive through revenue sharing for units that work together. We need then to change state government statute, the Urban Cooperation Act, which currently dictates how they combine services and actually raises the cost. So we need to help local governments, and it's not that we're going to drive it, but we're going to help them.
State Rep Paul Opsimer, thanks for coming in.
Anytime.
It's early, but it's great to have you. You look bright-eyed and excited. This is Tim Doctor in for Michael Patrick Shields in the morning with the State of the State at First Light. This is Tim Doctor in for Michael Patrick Shields. This is the State of the State at First Light, and boy, do we mean that, at First Light. We're still waiting for it here in the studios. Welcome, Fox 47 and Michigan Talk Network studio stations across the network. Great to have you this morning. My name's Tim Doctor. Toll-free number is open for your calling pleasure. 888-900-9966. Taking your reactions on Governor Snyder's first State of the State speech. Do you think, after what you heard last night, that he will put Michigan back on track? That's what we want to know from you. 888-900-9966. And in studio right now is the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party, Mark Brewer. Mark, great to have you with us.
Morning, Tim.
And the Senate Democratic leader, Gretchen Whitmer. Gretchen, thanks for coming in this morning.
My pleasure.
Reactions. There it is. It's not an in-depth question. Reactions. Go ahead.
Well, I think that the governor laid out the opening salvo to where he views Michigan going. And I listened to Representative Opsimer, and I think the word that I would use to describe the speech was inclusive. And that makes me cautiously optimistic. He talked about that, he had secured $550 million from the federal government, and when he says that, he means the Obama administration. So this is a Republican governor willing to reach out to a Democratic president to help the state of Michigan, and that, I think, is going to be key to us moving forward, is our ability to work together.
There was a lot in there that crossed the aisle throughout the entire speech. Was it surprising to you, Gretchen?
No, in my meetings with the governor, he has talked about, being bipartisan, rolling up our sleeves and getting to work, which is a phrase that I use often. Get no more gimmicks and games, that we're really going to set Michigan's fiscal house in order. How we do that, that's the devil in the details, and we'll see on February 17th where, the values really are, because that's when the budget will be presented.
Yeah. Mark Brewer?
Well, Tim, I think there are a lot of things in the speech last night that Democrats can get behind and are agreeable to. The expansion of education in the state, P through 20, as they call it last night. That's terrific. Healthcare, making this a healthier state. The urban initiatives that they talked about, building the so-called DRIC, the second bridge across the Detroit River. There are a lot of things in that speech last night that Democrats can be very supportive of. And I got to tell you, I think the governor's biggest problem is going to be getting support from his own party. The Republicans blocked the building of the DRIC the last couple of years. They're a party that's consistently opposed the expansion of health care in this state. I mean, he's sitting there with Bill Schuette right in front of him, who is in the middle of a lawsuit trying to take away health care benefits from people in the state of Michigan. So I think he's going to get a lot of support from Democrats in the legislature for a number of those items last night, and his biggest problem is going to be his own party.
So we're in for some interesting times. Is that the phrase?
Well, there's no question. Michigan's in a transformational time in our state's history, and it won't get dull. That's for sure. There's a lot of tough work ahead of us, and the question is, can the legislature summon the courage it takes to make the tough decisions, and which are the right decisions? I'm not talking about the next election, but 25 years from now, because 25 years from now, no one's going to remember a speech that was given or a vote that was cast. They're going to judge us by whether or not the state of Michigan is better off than it is today. And that's really got to be our focus. It's got to be a long-term, real solution focus. It's
a good statement. I agree completely with that. What do we do? Does Michigan become more successful? And what do you think of his metrics? Let's talk about those for a second. And when you hear a governor come in and talk about measuring again and again and again, and this is our path to success, that's some foreign language, isn't it, in government?
I don't think so, but it's a new phrase, and it's certainly a good one. My mother actually was kind of a carpenter, and she always said, measure twice, cut once, right? So we need to know whether or not things are succeeding, which is why we Democrats have proposed an audit of all state tax giveaways to say, are they really accomplishing the goal they were enacted to do? If so, let's keep them. If not, let's get rid of them. And there's a lot of savings to be found in the budget just using metrics and outcomes-based decision-making when you go through the $36 billion of tax giveaways on the books. That's where we should start, and I'm all for using metrics. We got to make good decisions based on facts.
Mark, reaction?
I think metrics are a terrific idea. I mean, for example, we've lost 800,000 jobs in this state in the last 10 years.
Right.
We want to hear more details about Governor Snyder's plan to bring all those jobs back. So that's a very important metric. What's the unemployment rate? What's the job creation rate? All those kinds of things are very, very important. And a number of the things he talked about last night will contribute to good metrics, right? You need a healthy, educated workforce in order to grow jobs, to bring companies to Michigan, to grow existing companies here. And so measuring ourselves on all those things and improving in all those measures are absolutely the right way to go.
In about 30 seconds, what do you think about repealing the MBT and putting in the 6% corporate tax with the cuts that we're looking at, the big elephant sitting in the room, is where are those cuts going to come? And that's in February. Any hint as to how he's going to do that? And he's hinted, but do you get more on the rumor mill than I do?
Well, in 10 seconds.
Sorry, 10 seconds. I
coming.
sucked up the air.
Changes coming. What is it going to look like will
Yeah.
be the details that we'll look forward to seeing on February 17th. We cannot sacrifice the children and public safety as we move the state of Michigan forward, though.
Okay, that's the voice of Senate Democratic Leader Gretchen Whitmer. Gretchen, thank you for coming in this morning. And Michigan Democratic Party Chair Mark Brewer, thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
This is Tim Doctor in for Michael Patrick Shields in the morning. We'll be right back with more. Good morning, Michigan. This is Tim Doctor in for Michael Patrick Shields in the morning. And this truly is the state of the state at first light. We have had guests wall to wall. We just had in Senate Democratic Leader Gretchen Whitmer, Mark Brewer, Democratic Party Chair, and it's going to keep on going. We've got Jace Bolger, Speaker of the House, in studio. He'll be on in just a few minutes, and it looks like we do have the governor on the phone, and he's ready to go. Governor Snyder, welcome to the program, sir.
Happy to be with you.
It's great to have you. Governor, first off, as an entertainer, I just want to say that watching you last night was great because you were genuine. And I appreciate that at a personal level. I watched you talking to Michigan, and the way that you related, it was just very genuine, and I think that's a great element to add to politics, sir.
Well, thank you. I love the state, and I hope that comes across because I'm excited to have the opportunity and the honor to take on some of these issues. They're not easy, but they need to be done, and getting them done will just be a great thing for our state.
You talked about repealing the Michigan business tax and putting in a 6% corporate replacement tax. I want to ask you right out of the gate, well, I've got you. Have you considered at all the Michigan fair tax?
Yes. Actually, I've looked at that during the campaign, and in a lot of ways there are some really interesting ideas and concepts in that. And the way I view it is I think it would be premature to try to jump to something that too early. But in terms of longer-term issues or overall tax reform, it's an interesting idea that should be considered. But in terms of the priorities, the first priority needs to be addressing the Michigan business tax and solutions that would work well in that regard.
That sounds like good wisdom. I'll accept that for right now. Talk about economic gardening. I love to hear that because I'm a huge advocate for small businesses in the state, and it seems like they've been ignored for a long time and that they need help. Let's grow our own. Is that what we're talking about here?
It is. Because if you look at it, if you go back to the basics of business, if you had a challenged business with challenging customer situations and such, do you spend your time making sure your current customers are the happiest, most successful, or do you go after new customers? And Business 101 is you always take care of your current customers first. And the best way to earn new customers in the long term is to have the happiest, best customers right in your own backyard. So the way I view it is let's focus on economic gardening as the top priority and help successful Michigan businesses be created, grow, do well. And then the word of mouth from that will be our best marketing to bring in people from out of state.
So we won't see too much recruitment from out of state then and giving huge, basically paying businesses to come to Michigan anymore?
Yeah, the idea of using huge incentive packages didn't make sense to me, and that's something I made clear on the campaign trail. We'll still spend some time marketing because it's just important to be out there so people are aware of who we are and try to create a positive environment or understanding of Michigan. So we'll still do some hunting, but without that big bag of money.
That sounds like a great plan.
Out there. That's not the right way to do things.
I loved your statement. Again, I'm a small business guy. They are the backbone of Michigan and throughout the country. And when you said no more picking winners and losers, I almost jumped off the couch and went, yes, somebody gets it. And you know what? It looked like everybody jumped off their seats on the floor when you said that.
Well, that's the right thing to do. And if you look at small businesses, the backbone, and people realize those small businesses are the core of creating jobs and creating good livelihoods for people. And some of those small businesses grow into the next big business. If you look at Ford and GM, they started as small businesses.
So if we're not going to pick winners and losers anymore, I have to ask, what is the role of a talent coordinator in your administration?
Well, it's not picking winners and losers, but helping all, particularly at the youngest stages of a company's creation in terms of making sure they match up with the best talent. Because in many cases, and this was the experience from Ann Arbor Spark, it's actually been in process there for several years, is it added a lot of opportunities that help create new companies as much as any other activity, because you might have a really talented idea person that could have an idea that could become a company, but they need to meet a finance person or a marketing person. And on their own, they didn't have the skills to do that or the network to find the best match. And by the talent coordination efforts that's already been going on in that community, they were able to find that match, which literally led to the creation of new companies. That's not picking one industry over another, but helping create something that is the right thing to do. And the idea there is, let's scale that across Michigan. Let's make it so we can do that across our state.
Governor Snyder, I've got to ask you the one question about item pricing. Was that, for years, have you sat there and looked at stuff on the shelf and thought, this is ridiculous? Is that one of those things like the average guy has in the back of their head as they look at it as the built-in cost to a business, and you just thought, this is ridiculous? Or did that just pop up on the plate in the last couple of months?
No, I've been thinking about that because it is something that's ridiculous because, in fact, it's a cost of business, but that cost gets passed on. So it's really coming out of the consumer's pocket. That's the big outrage of it. And I like to, if you think about it, think about when you traveled to another state and might have done some shopping. Did you go into that store then when you looked at the shelves and get outraged just because they didn't do item pricing the way we do?
Right.
No.
Right. Where are my individual price tags at? I need those here. Right. I noticed, Governor Snyder, that when you were talking about the bridge, the Detroit River International Crossing, you said no debt would be added to Michigan for that. Well, what about paying a bunch of cash out of pocket though, like a big pile of money for that?
No, there are not big piles of money involved in this process, and that's one of the beauties of this, is that this is an opportunity for us to really, as I said, do a lot for international trade in terms of making Michigan much more a center for that creates jobs and creates opportunity and is actually better national security in the sense of adding another crossing, because I mentioned the situation when we had the storm and problems happened up at the Blue Water. So let's create more options here, and I want to focus on all our border crossings in terms of making them more user-friendly, more positive, and add another crossing, and let's go. Let's create some international trade, more international trade.
And Governor Snyder, just one last question before I go. Do I have your word that there are no tax hikes on the table when these cuts come down the pipeline? Is that going to stand?
Well, again, that's where I've always been, but as a practical matter, I've always said I view those as political gimmicks when you make promises to people and those kind of pledges. So I don't do those, but I'm clearly focused on showing value for money government. We have to show our citizens that we're going to be cost efficient, and we need to deliver results there, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to do a better job in how we manage our government as the best way to move us forward, so better services at a lower cost.
Governor Snyder, thank you so much. I do have to tell you, the first two Democrats that came in here, Mark and Gretchen, they were very pleased with your speech. So I hope that goodwill carries over into your administration and things go smoothly, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And that's what this is all about, is about bringing people together. There's a lot of good common ground that Michiganders can all win together, and let's just get it done. So thank you.
Governor Snyder, we wish you the best of luck. We'll be watching, and I hope to talk to you down the road, sir.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care. There it is. And we have in the studio right now Jace Bolger, Speaker of the House here in Michigan. Jace, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Tim. Good to be here.
Good. He's just a likable guy, isn't he?
He absolutely is.
He just comes off as genuine. Anybody that can run a campaign and say one tough nerd is not taking himself too seriously. And as an entertainer and a talk radio guy, I like that. You just never take yourself too seriously in life because you wind up looking really silly somewhere down the road.
Absolutely. He's got a great sense of humor, but he gets it. He understands the challenges that we're facing, and he's going at it with a great positive attitude.
So reactions to the speech, and again, we were joking before we came on the air, and I said to Jace, Jace, make sure that we've got, party line, bumper sticker language. We need boilerplate, no having fun here in the studio. It's a joke. It's satire. So what is your reaction? Is there anything that the governor said, and you got to be honest, that you didn't like?
I think we're very much on the same page. With the focus on jobs, the focus on reducing regulation, the focus on getting out of the way and letting our job creators create jobs, making Michigan a more competitive place. You mentioned DRIC. That's an area of concern that the House Republicans have spoken out against the last proposal. He says this is a different proposal. We're looking, we're listening, and we want to see how that's different and how we move forward on that. But really, very much a united, optimistic approach. Michigan faces those big challenges, but what I sense in the legislature, and really what I sense from the people in Michigan, is that optimism that we are going to turn the corner. We are going to get the job done because people are not interested in talk. They want to see those results.
That is exactly it. And I am a citizen. I happen to talk on a microphone, but my wife and I have 4 kids and a dog that drives us crazy. We are Michiganders. And I don't want to hear, hey, look what we had in the past. You know, we had to deal with this. And I haven't heard that yet. And I appreciate that. And it looks like we're going to have some adults from both sides of the party, I hope, that step up to the plate and make some really tough calls. I mean, let's face it. When you guys go to take care of a $1.5 billion shortfall in the budget, there's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is a big number to cut out of there. But, yeah, your last-minute reaction before we move on.
Well, there won't be anything easy about what we've got to do, but we recognize that, and we're up to that challenge. We understand, again, we have to deliver those results, but Lansing too often has focused on making revenues match expenses. I think it's time we make our expenses match our revenues.
I like to hear it. Adults, who would have thought? Jay Spolger, Speaker of the House here in Michigan. When we come back on the Michael Patrick Shields in the Morning program, Tom Casperson, Frank Foster, State Senator and State Rep, coming up in just a few minutes. This is Tim Doctor in for Michael Patrick Shields in the Morning, and this is definitely the state of the state at first light. It will come sooner or later. The first light will come here in Michigan. We'd like to welcome Fox 47 and the Michigan Talk Network. By the way, if you want to join the program today, we're asking you, after you heard Governor Snyder's speech last night, his first State of the State, what's your reaction to that? Do you think that he will be able to help put Michigan back on the right path? That's what I want to know. You can give us a call toll-free this morning, 888-900-9966. And staring at me patiently in studio are a bunch of new faces. I'm going to play the memory game with them as we go around. We've got State Rep Dave Agema from Granville up in my neck of the woods. We have
Tom Casperson, State Senator from the 38th District in the Upper Peninsula.
Tom, welcome aboard.
State Representative Wayne Schmidt from Traverse City.
Wayne, great to have you in here.
State Rep Frank Foster from either side of the Mackinac Bridge.
From either side Frank. Great to have you guys.
We'll remember that.
Hit the dump button. Somebody hit the dump button. Are we ramped up? Okay. Is this thing live? All right. We'll start with you then, Frank. Mm-hmm. Initial reaction last night to the State of the State.
Great, Tim. This is my first State of the State being a freshman member of the legislature, but I was just amazed to see how close the executive branch's plans were what we were talking with on the House side. So real encouraged to hear about the May 31st deadline now moving toward the multi-year budgeting. And for my area, for northern Michigan and for the whole state, tourism. Pure Michigan's going to be funded, it seems like, hopefully. So we can continue with that program and bring some more jobs back.
Question on the Pure funding.
Mm-hmm.
Is that picking winners and losers?
I don't think so. I think it's a proven program that brings money back to the state, and it's our third largest economy here at $18 billion last year. So any program we can have that brings more dollars back than we spend on it is something we need to continue to fund.
Okay. Your reaction, and please give me a name, bail me out.
Representative Schmidt.
Schmidt.
Well, when you come from Traverse City, I was very excited to hear about Pure Michigan. This was my third State of the State. It was very refreshing to have Governor Snyder straightforward, give us what he's going to lay out, the metrics that he's introduced, the way we're going to review all the programs to make sure, as he said, value for taxpayer money. I was very excited about that. The Pure Michigan, again, for northern Michigan, that's just dynamite. It's, as Frank just said, proven results and how it brings business to Michigan, not only to northern Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, but to downstate. And people forget, I always tell them, that the largest tourist destination in the state of Michigan is not Traverse City or Mackinac Island, but actually Detroit, southeastern Michigan. And so when I work with my downstate colleagues, I say, this is not only good for us, but good for you. And the other highlight I liked, and coming from Cherry Country, is the mention of agriculture. For so many years, dare I say almost 8, it was just brushed over. $73 billion a year industry. Ag was forefront in Governor Snyder's speech, and that was great for the whole state.
Why do you think he was so keyed in on that? That's not his background, is it?
No, but I think he appreciates what it brings. As I mentioned, it's a $73 billion a year industry that touches all parts of the state. And then as we add more value in whether it's we're drying cherries, making wine, those type of value-added products to our agricultural base, it's just unlimited as far as getting Michigan back on track.
Mr. UP, Tom?
Well, I couldn't agree more with what was just said. I'm going to emphasize agriculture coming from the Upper Peninsula. There's so much more into it, and I know he didn't have time to emphasize everything, but
right.
There are so many things, and I really believe the Upper Peninsula right now is poised to be part of the engine to bring our economy back. We've got a surge of mining about to happen. The timber industry is poised with the biomass industry and the paper mills. There's a lot of opportunities for us in those areas, and I consider timber to be part of agriculture, but I think one of the biggest things I heard him say was we're going to stop kicking the can down the road. And I didn't get elected to come down here and just kick cans. I mean, let's fix the state. Tough decisions have to be made, and the people are ready for that.
Dave Agema, you want to talk about the DRIC? I thought you might want to. Just a hunch, you know.
Do you want to get into that right off the bat?
I want to go right for it.
Well, let me preface that. First of all, I'm glad that we have somebody who's a businessman in office. And my big issue has been for a long time, we got budgets that keep getting bigger when the amount of revenue that comes in the state gets less. Now, if anybody else did that, you'd go bankrupt. So I'm glad to see that. I'm glad he's going to measure and so forth. On the DRIC issue, you probably saw who stood and who didn't stand when that issue, excuse me, came up on the floor. But I want to see what numbers he has that I don't have, because I do know that there was a Price Waterhouse study in 2008 that said this DRIC cannot be built with just tolls alone. And there's been even internal memos within his own, Granholm's own administration within MDOT that said the pink elephant in the room is this cannot be built with tolls alone. So my goal is to protect taxpayers. I don't want to get us into a point where 20 or 30 years down the road, we're still paying for a bridge that we couldn't afford, that we didn't need. And even the MDOT's own people said that we probably won't need this bridge for 20 or 30 years.
He said no debt. And I asked him, and I said, okay, so we're going to pay a whole bunch out of pocket, and I think he said no. Was that his answer? How do we not? Is it free?
No, they're getting about $500 million from the Canadian government. So,
right. But I think what they're doing is he's using that to leverage the federal dollars to get our matches. But again, I think the devil's in the details. I, for one, wasn't expecting what I heard, because I've been on the other side of this issue for 5-6 years. I was there in the beginning with Representative Phil LaJoy, who was chairman of transportation. Saw a whole different story. So I think we better wait and give it a little time and let the governor explain to us what he's really talking about, so we get up to speed on it, and I'm going to hold judgment until it happens.
That's the voice of State Senator Tom Casperson. Let's talk about the Michigan business tax, and let me make sure I can keep you all kind of close on mic right there. Lean in tight when you go to talk. It gets a little soft sometime in the headphones. Let's talk with Representative Frank Foster. Frank, get rid of the Michigan business tax. 6% flat, go corporate. What about Michigan fair tax? I got to ask all of you that.
Yeah, no, I think the flat tax, then moving towards a consumption tax, is the long-term goal. But anything to get rid of that surcharge, the Michigan business tax, and I think it's important, having run a third-generation small family business, that we replace it. But what we're hearing from our small business and large business is replace it with something predictable and sustainable, low, broad, flat, and fair. And so we just don't want to change it with the new regime. We want to make sure that it ensures that this is a great state to do business in for the existing business, which I'm glad that Rick Snyder talked about. And once we take care of our current customers, we can go out and get some new jobs here and new customers.
That's a breath of fresh air, because I'm tired of the winners and the losers.
Amen.
And because when the losers blow up, I mean, we had a lady, the president from Grand Angels and investors in the West Side over there in Grand Rapids, and she said they were only picking 10% winners, and they're pros at it. They have 90% losers across their board when they invest. How does government somehow do better than professionals at picking winners and losers? That's got to go, and it's great. It's great to see that. Reactions on MBT, Michigan fair tax, stepping stone, 6%. You agree?
I think it is a stepping stone, and talking to the people back in northern Lower Michigan, their main concern is to make sure that it's small business friendly. Of course, that 6%, I think, as Frank mentioned, is Governor Snyder moving in the right direction. But with a lot of the startup companies and small entrepreneurs up in northern Michigan, they really want to see the devil in those details on that 6%. But I think the sustainability and the predictability is key. Tom and I were talking earlier. One of the other areas that, in addition to redoing the Michigan business tax, I think is going to be regulatory reform. A lot of people say, fine, I'll pay my taxes. I make money, fine. But these darn regulations are what's screwing me up more. They don't, one day here, one day there. They'll pay their tax. They just want to know that they can build their business, move their farm forward, whatever it is, without somebody slapping them with a fine or shutting them down.
Bingo.
That's going to be key.
Exactly it. In fact, we talked to State Rep Frank Antonori out of Tucson area in Arizona. And I was embarrassed that I hadn't thought of this, so I'll have to give him full credit. And I wanted to throw it in front of people here as you guys streamed by today, is why not a sunset act that we go after here in Michigan where we say, listen, all right, we're going to wipe the slate on this regulation stuff. And if it's so important, then everyone come back and we'll talk about those on an individual merit basis. But the strangulation in the economy with business, hey, we can't do that. That's a bigger threat to me than even the tax structure. We could fix the tax structure. We can stop the spending. But what can we make if you won't let me?
And look what's happening right now on the federal level with the EPA and the coal miners when they got them up and running and then pulled the permit on them. We've got departments today that are driving the ship through rules process, which needs to come back and be vetted through the legislature, which is the voice of the people, and stop this rules process through these departments with what I believe to be agendas, and that's fine. We all have our agendas, but the process is wrong. We should not have departments doing that.
And it's independent, and it needs to come back under and let you guys get your thumbs on it. State Rep Frank Foster, Rep Wayne Schmidt, Senator Tom Casperson, and Rep Dave Agema. I've got to take us out to a break here in a second. Guys, great talking with you. Thanks for the input. Best of luck. Working with everybody, getting this done, and making sure that Michigan is run by adults right now because we need it.
Amen.
Big time.
Thank you, Tim.
You bet, guys. This is Tim Doctor in for Michael Patrick Shields in the morning. We'll be right back. Good morning, Michigan. This is Tim Doctor. I'll be in here all morning here for Michael Patrick Shields, and this is a special edition of his program. This is the State of the State at First Light. Welcome to Fox 47 here in the studio with the TV cameras, and welcome to the Michigan Talk Network. We're going to go to the phones with Brenda in just a second before we get to some more guests. What I want to ask you is, after you heard Governor Snyder last night, did you think that he could put us on the right track in Michigan? Do we have the right agenda lined up to bring jobs to the state, to reform it, the business and tax codes? Do we have the right guy in there? That's what I want to know from you. Toll free, you can give me a call, 888-900-9966. Let's go over to line 2 to Brenda. You're on the Michael Patrick Shields in the Morning show. Hey, Brenda, you there?
Yes.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. What's your opinion on the matter this morning?
I thought it was a very good speech. It was like he was talking to the board. You know, he was the chairman talking to the board members. And one of the things that I just think is so very important is when he said to get rid of all the old regulations that are no longer any good. And that particularly hit me because I used to have a full-time job, and I used to do legal descriptions that could go on for pages. So I took real estate courses, and I didn't practice real estate, but I would bank my license with the state. And it used to cost $14, $15. And then during the Engler administration, he said, there are too many people doing this, and then he cut that off.
So you think this is going to be the right thing? That's what it sounds like, Brenda. And thanks for the phone call.
Okay.
It sounds like we've got the right guy there. I want to quickly get over because I didn't realize this segment was so short. I thought we had like 10 minutes. My fault, gentlemen, for keeping you waiting. In the studio, we have Charles Ballard. professor of economics at Michigan State University, and Ed Sarpolis from Target Insights. Ed, reactions last night from what you heard in the speech?
Bottom line, what I heard was I heard pure Michigan and not pure Republican. Snyder basically had his own agenda.
Right.
He ignored everything Republicans told him last month. They told him, don't talk about 6% flat tax, don't talk about DRIC, don't talk about your light on budgeting. He went in all those areas. He's his own person, and that's what he's going to push. So his business obstacle will be his own party, not the people of Michigan, because I think he set the right tone.
And Ed's right, because he used it, not these exact words, but in so many words, he even said, when he talked about DRIC, don't fight me on this, before he started talking about it.
Well, if he loses on DRIC, he sets the tone for the next 4 years, because the legislature knows now they control him, and he doesn't control the legislature.
Okay. Charles Ballard, professor of economics. What do you see inside of the speech coming down the road for Michigan? Economics, big topic right now.
Very big. I think that he's coming in at a very good time because most of the gut-wrenching structural transformation of our economy appears to be behind us. And so we're probably going to have some economic growth almost no matter what the policies. But there were a lot of things that Governor Snyder talked about last night that I think would push us in the right direction. I'd put the bridge over the Detroit River very close to the top of the list. I really like the pure Michigan emphasis. Of course, a lot of details about the budget remain to be seen.
A lot.
And I'm
Yes.
I'm very concerned about that, especially since we've already seen a reduction of more than 40% in the general fund budget just over the last 8 years. So we're starting from a place where the government's ability to deliver services is already compromised.
I want to jump in, but the point being, what you just said is true because what he last night was a speech of spending, not cutting.
Right. That's a great point. That's the first time I've heard this morning. That was a speech about spending and programs. The elephant, we've talked about a couple elephants in the room. I think the one I'm talking about is gray. I think Dave Ajamus said there was one that was pink, which was the cost on the bridge. The gray elephant is, can he make that $1.5 to $1.8 billion in cuts without taxes? Because I tried to get him to commit. Because I think somewhere in the background there may have to be some increases. And he wouldn't give me his word on it.
Well,
which
I will
I
tell you
asked for.
this, is that if you know his transition team, most of everybody on his transition team have never taken no tax pledge.
Smart. It's a smart move. I mean, for a politician to come out and say, no new taxes, we know where that came from. Read my lips. And that's what he was alluding to.
Yes.
Yeah. If you don't do something on the revenue side, it just becomes increasingly difficult. I mean, what are you going to do? Say we don't do Medicaid anymore? Say we won't pave any roads anymore? We're already in a tough spot, and so it will be very difficult to balance this budget without doing some things on the revenue side.
Reactions to the speech in terms of what was missing? What was something in there you thought might have been in there? Go ahead.
Well, the point being is that we have a growing concern with crime, with education. He didn't go into the other key issues that are going to turn around Michigan. You talk about attracting people here. You didn't speak about education. Our biggest budget item other than education and healthcare is crime in the prisons. He didn't talk about that. So those are the issues that really need to be addressed in his upcoming speeches. And the other thing that misses the fact, he said he's going to give policy speeches after he wants the budget passed. So I'm a little bit confused. How can you say things?
10 seconds for a parting remark, Charles Ballard.
I give him huge high marks for talking about bringing immigrants to Michigan because in today's political environment, immigrants have been demonized. I think that was a very courageous thing for him to say.
I think I saw Democrats jump up and cheer on that one, did they not? Okay. Gentlemen, I wish I had more time to dig into your minds and find out more about what you're thinking. We've got to go. This is Tim Doctor in for Michael Patrick Shields. This is Tim Doctor in for Michael Patrick Shields. This is the State of the State at First Light. I have to learn that, the 888. That's a nice one, learning from Michael there. The phone number here, if you'd like to join the program, 888-900-9966, taking your reactions about Governor Snyder's first State of the State speech last night. We've been loaded wall to wall with politicians, analysts, economists, you name it. Oh, my. They're on the program. Joining us right now, we have Kelly Rossman McKinney from Truscott Rossman Group. Kelly, great to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
Are you texting while we're talking?
No, I am not texting. I'm pulling up an email from my director of new media who gave me all kinds of information about tweets from last night. Tweets and retweets and the whole deal. And I'm just pulling them up because, interestingly enough, from last night's speech, Democrats seem to be more positive in terms of their take on this than Republicans, and in particular Tea Partiers, who I think are like crying in their tea this morning. Sorry.
Tea Partiers crying in their tea. Okay, there's the first analogy this morning.
Go.
Okay, so what sticks out about the governor's speech? Why do you think Democrats are so excited about this?
Well, I'll tell you why. And it's because instead of it being a partisan speech, it was a speech about the state of Michigan, and it really didn't follow party lines on either the Republican side or the Democratic side. And I think that's incredibly refreshing for all of us who really believe that most people in Michigan want a good, strong, moderate, who really doesn't lean too far to the left or the right.
Right.
And what Governor Snyder did yesterday in his speech was raise issues that are very near and dear to the hearts of Democrats: early childhood education, health care, et cetera. In addition, he also focused on issues that are important to Republicans, including economic gardening, entrepreneurialism, et cetera. And then other issues like agriculture, tourism, et cetera, came up. Now, what didn't come up, and it's really interesting that these things weren't mentioned, were things like crime, corrections, and really the budget.
Tough ones.
I mean, I got to tell you, I so mispredicted what he would do last night. I mean, I was so far off the bubble that I really shouldn't be here, but I am. So
I love the honesty.
I'm going to tell you, I thought what he would do is basically say, we've got to go on a fiscal starvation diet for the next 2 years. But after that, we're going to be able to eat again. I thought he would set the table for that. He didn't even mention it. I mean, he didn't say, hey, times are tough. We can't do any new programs. In fact, we're going to have to ratchet back. He didn't say any of that. Instead, he said, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. But it still struck a really good key. Plus, he did something people didn't expect, including folks like Senator Tom Casperson, the chair of Senate Transportation. He threw out DRIC, the Detroit River International Crossing. Apparently has a solution, although I know the private investor who's prepared to build a bridge at his own cost ain't happy, nor should he be. And it's a little surprising that a businessman who's now our governor is taking on someone who was willing with his own money to build a bridge to another country.
That's going to get messier.
Messier is a good thing, yeah.
Because the budget, what you said it, the hard ones were not there. This was a love fest, let's get together speech.
It really was, without being what I consider to be sort of a happy talk kind of a presentation. And actually, the other thing, Tim, I think it's important is that he came across as very genuine. He didn't use a teleprompter. There were a couple little fumbles, but that made him even more endearing.
Yes.
And he threw in a joke, and I don't know if you noticed, if you saw it on camera, those legislators were standing up, sitting down, standing up, sitting down. So I'm like, what is this, a calisthenics program? What are we doing here? And then he made a comment about obesity and dealing with obesity in Michigan. And then he said, well, I see some of you are a little bit more interested in dieting than others.
Right, off the cuff.
Bless his heart.
Yeah, and then he had the Mr. Miyagi moment from Karate Kid when he went to wave up somewhere up to his right, and it didn't fit the moment. He was like doing this important speech, and all eyes are on him. Probably a lot of people across the country, and all of a sudden, hey, he's like, look at, I'm down here.
Fred, look at where I am. And really, because he didn't come up from the legislature, that's the first time he's really probably been in the big room other than actually sort of rehearsing. But let me just go back to the hand gesture. Very reminiscent of Governor Jim Blanchard, who never quite got the hand gestures in sync with the speech. It's sort of what I consider to be the white guys have no rhythm syndrome.
Right. There's the PR coming out and the publicist. Right. That's great. Kelly Rossman McKinney from Truscott Rossman Group, thank you so much for coming in and putting some color and some intellect on the matter. It's great to talk with you.
Thanks, Tim.
We'll be right back in just a minute. Stay tuned with more coverage here on the Michael Patrick Scheel in the Morning program. I will be filling in here for a little bit longer, and then I'll head back to Grand Rapids to do my normal show, 11 to 2 up there. You can check me out online at timdoctor.com.